Ladies and gentlemen, and all the rest of you, it's time to start. Appreciate everybody being here this week. Hope that you've had a really good week and God's been blessing you, taking care of every need you have. And I'm glad that whatever you've been doing, however busy you've been, I'm glad you put it down and came up here tonight to spend some time with us. Appreciate those of you that are in the room and those of you that may be watching online. Thanks so much for spending a little time with us tonight at Belleville Baptist Church. Listen, we're going to take a look at a couple things as you came in today. Hopefully you got one of these sheets of paper. It's got our announcement list on there and our prayer list on there. So let's talk about what's going on, and we'll see what kind of things you can get involved with and be part of. First thing listed on here, on September the 7th, which is this coming Sunday, we will be having starting point. So it'll be a time to meet new folks to our church. We'll sit down, get together, visit, meet with me and the staff, and have a little lunch and talk about, well, who we are as a church and answer questions people have. And so if you're interested in that, you can always come and either come be part of it just to see what it's like, or you can come help with it. That'd be great, and represent our church and be a good host, and find out what kind of questions people are asking about our church. That'd be interesting, wouldn't it? All right, and then on the Friday, September the 12th, the senior adults are having a fellowship, and it involves, well, you bringing a covered dish, presumably with food in it, and then also having, as you have lunch together, also playing some games together, so that'll be good. Starts at 10 a.m. on that day, goes to 1, so you can find out information about that or sign up on our website. And then on September the 14th, that's a Sunday, deacons will have a meeting in the afternoon. That's all deacons at 4 p.m. Well, right here in this room. And then you see a note on here about an event coming up at the end of the month. Well, actually, now middle of the month. On Friday and Saturday, September 19th and 20th, the Seasons Conference that's held down at the Family Life Center. It's for people in their 20s and 30s. And look around and see if there's anybody here that fits that category. I don't think so. But maybe you know somebody. But you see the information there, the cost. Yeah, I see a young man back there. He doesn't look 20. Based on the number and age of his children, I'm going to say no. But yeah. All right. So you see information about that. Then also there's a note at the bottom here about our Operation Christmas Child effort this year. We're packing shoe boxes. We're collecting money to purchase the items, so that we can have a big day to pack all the shoe boxes together. And so I encourage you to give toward that. You see the goal there, $8,000. And you give through our church website, right there where you normally give. If you give online, there's a drop down for, well, the Operation Christmas Child offering. So help us with that, it'd be great, and see what God will do with that. I think it's a good ministry. And that's all the announcements that I have, unless you have others, or if you have any questions about these, I'll do my best. Anything? All right. Let it be known in the world of the internet that they had no questions. All right. Well, let's see. We've been doing a Bible study in the book of Judges, and was really less of a book study. We're not studying the whole book, but we've been kind of focused on one of the judges. You know, the book of Judges is all about a series of, well, leadership that God provided for the people of Israel, called Judges, and there are 12 of them highlighted in the book, and some of them you've heard of, some of them like Samson, some you heard the story of Samson and Delilah, and then there is the judge of Deborah, and several others that may be of note to you, and then others that you probably never heard of them, couldn't name them if you tried. And then you got this guy, Gideon, we've been talking about. And the story of Gideon has been pretty interesting. If you've been here every week, it has been a pretty fascinating journey for us to kind of watch and see what's going on in his life. And just kind of the helicopter view here, Gideon is a guy that God called out. It surprised him. An angel of the Lord met Gideon under a tree. Gideon is he was threshing wheat, hiding down by a winepress because of all the Midianite threat all around the encampment of the Israelites. And God came to him and said, you're going to be a warrior for me and my people, and you're going to defeat the Midianites. And so it's been a pretty interesting journey to see how Gideon has gone from somebody who was fearful to somebody who's faithful, from somebody who was doubtful about his own abilities to a great deal of confidence in God's abilities. And so we've seen him win some battles against the Midianites, and in fact we're going to kind of pick up there tonight. So we're in Judges chapter 8. That's where we're going to be tonight. So let's jump in there. This is Judges chapter 8, beginning in verse 4. All right. So let's read together. This is Judges 8, verse 4 says, Gideon then crossed the Jordan River with his 300 men, and though exhausted, they continued to chase the enemy. When they reached Succoth, Gideon asked the leaders of the town, please give my warriors some food. They're very tired. I'm chasing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. But the officials of Succoth replied, catch Zebah and Zalmunna first, and then we'll feed your army. So Gideon said, well, after the Lord gives me a victory over Zebah and Zalmunna, I will return and tear your flesh with the thorns and briars from the wilderness. That sounds like a good place to pause. Let's pause and pray together, all right? God, thanks so much for being with us. Thanks for giving us great examples in the Bible to read about so we can learn from, well, their successes, their mistakes, see how they learned from you and how you worked in their lives and through them. God, tonight I pray as we consider again the life of Gideon and his ups and his downs. God, I pray you teach us some things. Work in our lives, show us some things, give us your truth, and help us to grow because of it. Well, it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Well, we just read, verses 4 through 7, so we didn't read very far into this, but right before this, if you'll remember, there's some pretty significant things that happened. You remember that God said to Gideon, hey, you're going to you're going to destroy the Midianites, because there were a lot of Midianites and they had a lot of camels. And they were creating a lot of problems for the people of Israel. And so God raised up Gideon to be the champion. He said, you're going to win, you're going to defeat. And even though Gideon got off to kind of a slow start in his level of confidence that this is really what God wanted him to do, that's where he went through laying out the fleece and doing it even 2 times. But also, you remember that there was a point at which Gideon called together all the warriors that were available, the fighters from Israel, and it numbered somewhere in 34,000 or something like that. And God, you remember, told him, so you got too many people. We're going to win and defeat the Midianites, but I don't want you to do it with that many people, because then if you do it, you might think, well, you guys did it. You won't give me any credit. So God says you got too many. And that's where he starts kind of whittling down the number. Remember, he told Gideon, he said, tell everybody that's afraid, that just don't want to do this. Not really feeling this today. You can go home. And then they lost 22,000 people. And he said, God said, that's still too many. You still got too many people left. And so then they do the whole exercise where he brings them down to the river and says, all right, get a drink of water. And separated folks based on how they drank water. For those who scooped it up in their hands and lapped it out like a dog, put them in one place. And for those who got down on all fours and stuck their mouth or their tongue down in the water and drank that way, took them and sent them home. So they wound up with 300 men, right? And so where we were last week was, God had given Gideon a lot of confidence by this point. And so now they go into the encampment of the Midianites, and he's got this thing set up. They go in, nobody even has to draw a sword. They take horns, they take jars that they break, and they shout. And the Midianites are thrown into this sense of confusion, and they start fighting themselves and even killing themselves, and the rest of them are running away. So that's kind of where we are, is this just incredible victory that's been taken care of, and the Midianites, they're just decimated. And so now Gideon is, victorious. He's on a winning streak here. Everything's going great. God has shown up and shown out. And he's in pursuit with the 300. He's got his army. He's in pursuit of these final 2 kings of the Midianite tribes. And so there he is. He's crossed. It says he crossed the Jordan with his 300 men. And he's on the way chasing those two guys, right? Zebah and Zalmunna. But there's something interesting that takes place here, all right? Thus far, everything we've observed about Gideon and the way God's working in his life is, first, Gideon's reluctant, he's not confident, and God accommodates Gideon in every way and demonstrates to him that, yes, this is God's call in his life. Yes, God is with you. You've got the power of God all over you. And the Midianites, you've already won. God has already said, the Midianites have been delivered into your hand, kind of thing. And so in the battles, we've seen those, they're successful. But there's a place where we're reading tonight, and you'll see in what follows, where the story kind of takes a turn. And you probably picked up on that a little bit with that whole, I'm going to tear your flesh with thorns kind of thing. And so where we are tonight kind of marks a significant change in the wrong direction for Gideon based on everything we've seen up until now. You remember when the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon under that tree, when he was threshing wheat. Remember how the angel of the Lord addressed him? Let me remind you. In Judges 6 verse 12, it says, the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, mighty hero, the Lord is with you. Well, what we're reading now, what we've just read, and what we're going to read after this, he doesn't sound very heroic at all. And so, this is kind of one of those moments where here's a story, here's a tale about somebody who is a man of valor, somebody God uses, and the heroics that are taking place time and time again. But then, like so many characters who, are spoken of as good guys, there are times they become kind of bad. And so Gideon kind of starts the story kind of turns a little bit, and he goes from this reluctant warrior to a successful warrior, and now he's doing some things you kind of scratch your head and go, really? So let's take a look at that and talk about that a little bit, all right? I pulled this quote from a commentary when I was preparing to teach tonight, and I thought this was really good, so I just thought I'd read it to you. This commentator says, in chapters 6 and 7, we've witnessed his transformation, talking about Gideon, from a fearful private citizen to a fearless agent of God, willing to take on the enemy against all odds, not to mention even a sensitive diplomat. But the portrait of the man the author paints in this chapter creates a radically different impression in the reader's mind. And one of the things you'll notice in the verses we just read, and in the verses that will follow, there's not a whole lot of mention of God at all. God's kind of absent from this whole narrative, which I think we can go ahead and decide up front. That's probably the problem, right? You start leaving God out of things, then you do kind of get off track and start doing the wrong things, all right? So, verse 5 says, when they reached Succoth, Gideon asked the leaders of the town, please give my warriors some food. They're very tired. I'm chasing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. So, even though, I guess this is kind of a reminder for us in a lot of ways that even though the power and authority of God was on Gideon and that 300, God used that 300 to destroy the Midianites. Here what we're seeing is these guys are tired and these guys are hungry. All right. Yet another, I guess, moment where the scripture reminds us that there's nothing extraordinary about these guys. They're regular human beings. They didn't even have to fight, but they're tired and they're hungry. They've been in pursuit of these two kings, right? So these guys, even in the power and authority of God, they still get hungry, they still get tired, and they still need assistance at times, all right? But the leadership there in Succoth was, they weren't very nice, right? It says that the officials replied, you catch Zebah and Zalmunna first. In other words, you're pursuing the bad guys, you go get those bad guys, and then we'll talk about feeding your army. And so they get kind of a snarky response and kind of say, hey, finish the job first. So Gideon as you might imagine, he didn't really appreciate that response, because he was, in his mind, and rightly so, he'd been doing some pretty amazing work defending Israel against the enemies, and had been very successful, and was working really hard, and these folks, they didn't want to offer anything. So then in verse 7 it says, so Gideon said, after the Lord gives me victory over Zebah and Zalmunna, I will return and tear your flesh with the thorns and briars from the wilderness. So, this sounds pretty dramatic, doesn't it? I mean, it kind of makes your skin hurt just thinking about that, right?
If he found a good batch of salt briars, it was worse than that.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure this is not something that was a random thing he said. It's probably something that's been done before, right? And there's probably, some acquired skill. In fact, it was not uncommon to be used as a punishment, right? So this would mean that that the people that were being punished in this way, they would have heavy weights placed on them, and then they would be dragged over thorns and briars that would tear their bodies up, right? So it was kind of a cruel torture that was done to ancient captives, prisoners of war kind of thing. So, this was pretty big incentive, I guess, on his part, because he's saying, when I get back, this is going to happen to you. But I guess one thing is, he was so determined to accomplish his mission, they said, well, I could do it now, right? But I'm not going to. I'm going to go and do just what you said, you smart aleck guys. And then I'm going back here. And when I was reading this and thinking about this, I was thinking about those times growing up as a kid, whenever your mom says to you, yeah, you're about to get spanked, go get a switch. And I can just imagine those guys out there combing the wilderness around them for we'll take care of getting the briars for you, and getting the wimpy ones, right? I'm pretty sure that didn't happen that way, but that's just how I think. So, yeah. So then, Gideon and his army, well, they get turned away. They're still tired. They're still hungry, which means they're probably kind of grouchy. And so then they leave Succoth and they go to a second place, and they go to a place called Peniel. This is Judges 8 verse 8. It says, from there, Gideon went up to Peniel and again asked for food, and he got the same answer. What is up with these guys? And so he said to the people of Peniel, after I return in victory, I will tear down this tower. So they had this big tower. He said, I'm going to tear that down. So he's got these two different ways he is going to discipline these people. Something bad is going to happen because you're being like this, right? So, and I guess at this point, I said it kind of takes a different turn. The biggest thing that I noticed up until this point is all of a sudden God's not in the picture. There's no discussion about God, other than he does make one quick comment where he says, when the Lord delivers these two guys in my hands. But that's just him talking about externally about what he believes God's going to do. And there's no, everything else he's been having discussions with God, and God's been reassuring him, and God's been giving him direction and reminding him of his power and authority he's given him. And now I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say he's doing the wrong thing, because I would be pretty upset, I guess, if I had the army that was defending all of them and winning against the enemy, and I'd be pretty upset if I was hungry and tired and they didn't give me anything to eat. I have been known on occasion to get grouchy when I'm hungry. I don't know. It doesn't seem like a big deal to me, but Vicki, she might tell you a different story. But and I guess the question too in this story, which is one of the epic hero stories in the Bible, it's kind of like, why is this part even included in the narrative? They had these two stops where they asked for food and they were told they weren't going to get anything until they finished the job, and then in both scenarios, the hero of the story says, yeah, we're gonna go do this, and when we get through, you're gonna get it, right? Just wait till your father comes home. And so, but what this does is it kind of exposes, and I think this is why it's in the story, is it kind of exposes some of the weaknesses that are in the nation of Israel. You know, Israel's made up of a lot of different tribes, and you know, and what it does is it tells you that there's not unity here, right? Just like whenever the people in Judah, they were upset because the idols were torn down in Joash's temple, and Gideon did that, and the people in Israel didn't have a lot of confidence in Gideon until he started having battle success. And so this one of those things that tells you that there's fractures in these different kingdoms, and that there's a reluctance to welcome Gideon and to accept him as a leader. So a lot of distrust and lack of confidence, right? You know what you find is that people aren't nearly as helpful to folks that they don't particularly trust and that they don't like, right? And so this is kind of indicative of the kind of relationship that Gideon had with at least some of the people in Israel. So, all right, yes ma'am.
I thought that over there in verse 2 or something, I thought when they got Oreb and Zilp, I thought they were kings, but they were princes. And then now they're chasing the kings.
Mm-hmm.
But you think about it, they're 300 men, and these different locations knew that there was 15,000 with the kings they were chasing.
Yeah.
So that's sort of understanding. You think you can go over there and defeat them, and you just 300 men, and the kings
So you think
have all
that
this.
their reluctance to help was kind of an indication they didn't have confidence that Gideon could do that?
That's right.
Well,
They didn't think you could do it.
well, and
He
they weren't
couldn't.
there, and they weren't there when they were the original, the big battle that had just taken place. They weren't there at that point either. So, so you could be right. It could be an indication they didn't really have a lot of confidence in Gideon.
There's another interesting side to this. These two towns may or may not have been Israelite at the time.
Mm-hmm.
There's one that I just kind of looked at. The one scholar thinks that these were not Israelite cities and that they would have been vassals.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's Gideon going to someone in treaty, vassal below him, basically saying, you need to come help us, and they're saying no.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this, if that's the case, even if it's not, even if these are Israelite towns, they ought to be helping Gideon anyway, because Gideon is trying to do God's work here.
Yeah.
So even in either way, they should be helping him, and they're not. But it's the fact that Gideon responds with a vigilante sort of justice.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why it's in the narrative, because when you go on past this, you see him ended up creating and later worshiping
Oh, don't get ahead of me.
an idol of his own making. And so you almost have this slide from doing this incredibly good thing that God has set him apart to do, and very quickly he gets off track with trying to take justice into his own hands. It's like the valor has gone to his head, and before you know it, he's worshiping another god.
Yeah.
And it's this falling right off the cliff. And I think that's part of what this is showing us, is that even this person who didn't have confidence in himself and has struggled to get to the point to where he's finally trusting God and does this miraculous thing, and you think, oh man, this is incredible. Now this guy is the guy that's completely messing things up.
Yeah.
Think he did.
I'm sorry? Oh. Well, it's kind of, like so many of the life stories of the people in the Bible. You know, you got Moses, God used in incredible ways. God empowered, God led him, God anointed him for service. And he did a whole bunch of great things in getting the people set free under the bondage and slavery in Egypt, leading them out of Egypt, leading them through the wilderness years and into the promised land. Then there was that moment where God told him to speak to a rock, and he decides to hit it with a stick instead, and that disobedience changed everything for Moses, and everything went in a whole different direction for him. And same thing with David. David was, the shepherd boy who defeated Goliath, and God's anointed, God's chosen, man after God's own heart. But then we just did a study about all the things that, went wrong in David's life because of some really bad choices. And, so I guess it's kind of a cautionary tale for us to recognize that, no matter how strong we feel in our walk with the Lord, no matter how far along we feel in our spiritual maturity, there's still a reason every day for us to be cautious and pray that God would protect us from, saying the wrong thing, thinking the wrong thoughts, making the wrong decisions, taking the wrong steps, even if we try to frame them in a way that looks like we're doing the right thing. Because I'm sure everything Gideon's doing, there are some elements in there that are justified in what he's doing. And probably if we stop the story there, okay, well, he went to these leaders in these different cities and they didn't help him. They deserve a little, punishment, But the progress, though, does go to a place where it gets even worse. And it's kind of that slippery slope thing that we're kind of getting on here. So
back in verse 2, he had Ephraim come at him, how come you didn't call us to come help him out? He had to he had a different tone at that particular time, and they went away appeased, you might say.
Yeah, he was a great diplomat for them.
So he got questioned one time and did okay on that one. But when he got to the next group, he didn't take it as well the next time around. He got questioned again.
I guess when you're tired and hungry is a different story. Maybe he wasn't hungry when Ephraim came.
He needed a Snickers.
He needed a Snickers, that's right. That Snickers bar, that's right. All right, let's move on. Let's go to verse 10, because now he's in pursuit of the enemy. It says, by this time Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor, and with about 15,000 warriors. All that remained of the allied armies of the east, for 120,000 had already been killed. That's a pretty successful campaign there. Verse 11 says, Gideon circled around by the caravan route east of Nobah and Jobah, and taken the Midian army by surprise. I'm sure they were pretty tired of surprises by now. Zebah and Zalmunna, the two Midianite kings, fled, but Gideon chased them down and captured all their warriors. And so again, here's Gideon and these 300 warriors that he had, right? They're chasing down these kings, 120,000 already been killed, and 15,000 were left. And the Bible says that Gideon, captured the entire army, and chased down everybody. So even tired and hungry, man, there's some amazing things happening in the lives of these men. And so, mission accomplished, I guess. When you look at that all by itself, that's a spike the ball moment for them. And so now they've got Zebah and Zalmunna, and the two Midianite kings are captured. I just, when I read this, I thought, if this were taking place in our time frame, then all those people in Succoth and all those people in the other place, Peniel, well, they would have been aware that Gideon led his army out there and had this kind of success, because they'd be on TV or all the airwaves, and they'd be aware of it, and they'd be going, oh no, oh no, he has captured those two kings. We told him, and we were snarky and said, hey, with our attitude, said, you go and capture these guys, you come back, then we'll talk about feeding your army. So just imagine if they actually knew about that when it happened, and that dread that would fill them, knowing that he's on his way back, right? Because that's exactly what he does. He captures these two Midianite kings, and then he returns. Verse 13 says, after this, Gideon returned from the battle by way of Harry's Pass. There he captured a young man from the Succoth and demanded that he write down the names of all the 75 officials and elders in town. Gideon then returned to Succoth and said to the leaders, "Here are Zebah and Zalmunna. When we were here before, you taunted me, saying, 'Catch Zebah and Zalmunna first, and then we will feed your exhausted army.' Then Gideon took the elders of the town and taught them a lesson, punishing them with thorns and briars from the wilderness. He also tore down the tower of Peniel and killed all the men in town." All right? So he comes back, and it's time to, take your punishment here. Daddy's home. You can hear the belt flopping out through those belt loops. And so now, I like the added touch too, that the first thing he does is he then just barges back into town and goes, "All right, where are the leaders?" He captures one guy that says, "All right, I want you to write down, make a list of every leader in this town." And so he got everybody's name. He had somebody to take in names. And then he got every one of them and punished them, just like he said, dragging them over the thorns and briars. And then also, same thing in the town of Peniel. He tore down the tower that he told them he was going to tear down. And then he kind of added an extra touch. He killed all the men in the town. So, pretty dramatic, right? I guess by this point, he's much more tired and much more hungry. So that makes him more hangry. So then you got this punishment that takes place, and then to the fate of the Midianite kings. In verse 18, it says, "Then Gideon asked Zebah and Zalmunna, 'The men you killed at Tabor, what were they like?' 'Like you,' they replied. 'They all had the look of a king's son. And they were my brothers, the sons of my own mother,' Gideon exclaims. 'As surely as the Lord lives, I wouldn't kill you if you hadn't killed them.' And turning to Jether, his oldest son, he said, 'Kill them.' But Jether did not draw his sword, for he was only a boy and was afraid. And then Zebah and Zalmunna said to Gideon, 'Be a man, kill us yourself.'" Dumbest thing anybody's ever said. And so Gideon killed them both and took the royal ornaments from the necks of their camels. You don't take your camels' things. So anyway, so now the two Midianite kings are dead, and we've kind of come full circle here, and we're kind of at this place where, all right, I guess you can say, Gideon's a man of his word. Everything he said he was going to do, he did. God was still working with him at a place where he was able to go in pursuit to finish the job that God had called him to do, to completely destroy. God told him that he was going to destroy all the Midianites, and he did, to his credit. These little disagreements in Succoth and Peniel led to some extra things that came along. And so then, when he gets back to Israel proper, it says in verse 22, it says, "Then the Israelites said to Gideon, 'Be our ruler. You and your son and your grandson will be our rulers, for you have rescued us from Midian.'" So now all of a sudden, people that were skeptical about Gideon, and people that were, maybe not so crazy about him being the man, now they're encouraged, because, well, before they had a terrible Midianite problem. Midianites are gone. And they were in trouble. Now they're not in trouble, and Gideon has proven himself to have God with him and to be an effective leader. And so now they say, well, hey, come on, you be our ruler. You and your son and your grandson, you'll be our rulers, and because you've rescued us from Midian. And so they're kind of on a high here. Then you would think, well, the story would be great here, because Gideon would go, all right, I am your leader, I'm King Gideon. But did he do that? Not so much, right? So then you get to verse 22. It replies in 23. It says, "But Gideon replied, I will not rule over you, nor will my son. The Lord will rule over you." That's good. "However, I do have one request, that each of you give me an earring from your plunder you collected from your fallen enemies." The enemies being Ishmaelites. They all wore gold earrings. "Gladly," they replied. And they spread out a cloak, and each one threw in a gold earring, and he had gathered from the plunder. And the weight of the gold earrings was 43 pounds, not including the royal ornaments and pendants, and the royal clothing worn by the kings of Midian, or the chains around the necks of their camels. Gideon made a sacred ephod from the gold and put it in Ophrah, his hometown. But soon all the Israelites prostituted themselves by worshiping it, and it became a trap for Gideon and his family. That's the story of how the people of Israel defeated Midian, which never recovered. Through the rest of Gideon's lifetime, about 40 years, there was peace in the land. So there is this full circle moment here where the people of Israel, after all the success that Gideon had, say, hey, you come and you be our ruler. And he says, no, I'm not your ruler. My son won't be your ruler. My grandson won't be your ruler. God is your ruler. The Lord's going to be your ruler. And then, for reasons unknown,
Fell off the roof.
he says, hey, all I want you to do is give me gold earrings. And so then they lay out a cloak, put all these 43 pounds worth of gold, and various other, souvenirs from his conquest. And then he makes this image. And then he puts it in his hometown. What was the first task that God gave him to do?
Go down.
To go into his father's house in his hometown and tear down all the images that were there for Baal worship. And so his first job was to go tear down false idols and to get rid of all the artifacts of Baal worship. What's he doing now? God's called him, God's used him, God's empowered him, God's won great victory through him and for him. And what's he do? I'm going to make a gold image. And we're going to put it right back where we had the Baal worship, installation. And then what happens? All the people said, well, we'll worship that. And all of a sudden there's a big problem. So what do you make of that? Now, what's the lesson here for us? Go ahead, James.
Well, my footnotes say, this often happens when no one stops to ask, what might go wrong? Or is there a possibility of negative consequences? In our plans and decisions, we should take time to anticipate how a good idea might lead to a potential problem.
Oh, I like that. That's good. That's good. Any other thoughts on it?
But I mean, why would he do that?
That's a great question. I think that this probably falls in the category of what Ronald said, too big for his britches. Sometimes we can't handle success, which I think is why we don't have any more of it in our lives than we do. I think success can lead people to think much more themselves. And like I said, when we started tonight, was everything we've read tonight, there's been an obvious absence of God. Other than a couple of offhanded references that he made, when the Lord does this, or the Lord gives me this. But other than that, it's in stark contrast to everything before. And so I think when we start, even unintentionally, removing God from our daily conversations and daily interactions, no matter what we've done, no matter what we've accomplished, we kind of set ourselves up to go off track and to fall into sin.
Well, you think it was Gideon that did it, most of the people, because you don't see him do any sacrificing to the Lord once everything is all.
Like the other rulers did.
Now, the ephod is something that was used by priests, correct? To wear? Am I correct in that?
I don't know that I can answer that affirmatively.
Yes.
But
I'll go with seminary.
I'm sitting there wondering, is it a reminder of what had taken place? It was put in his hometown as a reminder of what had taken place to the end of it all, the campaign and everything. but it could have been the people. It didn't say that Gideon put it there for worship, it was just put there as a reminder. You know, they always had stones or whatever they put in place if they went through a challenging time as a reminder.
Yeah.
But it could have, like I said, it was a good thing that was put in place, but that the people started. Because you see on down, once he dies, they totally go back to everything before.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know, you make a fair point. It may not be that Gideon, said, yeah, I made this and put it here, I'll worship it. He may not have encouraged it, but it doesn't change the fact that once God delivered the people from their enemy, which was their main issue that he was dealing with, that this is what happened, that they wound up just going right back to a lot of their previous habits,
Well, he sure didn't, he didn't put it there to honor God.
That's right.
Because
It also doesn't say, I guess you say, he doesn't say that he put it there for them to worship, but it also doesn't say that he put that there to honor God.
Yeah.
So, I guess we're left to interpret that a little bit, but.
Yes.
I'm sorry?
Said it was sacred.
Yeah. Well, and he put it kind of back where they were already used to worshiping, just they weren't used to worshiping God there, so.
Well, it's almost like God was, had to work with Gideon to get him up and to do his work for him to the top of the mountain. And then Gideon just started to slide right back down, which that's what we do a lot of ourselves.
Yeah.
We get to a high point and we just can't handle it. And
Yeah.
we start sliding down.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
And he could have taken, the people asked him to be their leader. He could have done that. He knew what God could do with his help. So why wouldn't he lead them?
Yeah.
And he backed off of that.
You just got through telling them the Lord will be your leader.
Yeah.
I mean, he walked away from it, the Lord will be your leader. So, yeah, it's hard to kind of figure out what led all that back in place.
Well, I think one of the things I guess it highlights is Israel being God's chosen people. It was clearly God's plan, his idea that Israel be delivered from their overwhelming enemies. That was obvious. And I think a lot of times his people, we confuse his plan to defend us from our enemies and to provide for us in our needs. We kind of think that's the core of our relationship with him. Our relationship is built on him doing things for us. And maybe we get caught up in that kind of aspect of the relationship, but leave out the worship, leave out the awe, leave out the humility that one would have as a subject before God, to acknowledge his holiness. And I think that's what kind of get left off. You helped us, you defeated the enemy. Woo, yeah, they're gone, not a Midianite in sight. But then, obviously, what should follow is, worship of God. Acknowledging his deliverance, and I think sometimes we're subject to that kind of thing. Where God does amazing things for us, but all we think about is that thing and not the God who delivered us, the God who protected us.
You mentioned earlier that what's going on in Gideon is in a way going on with Israel.
Yeah.
You take a step back, look over the whole book of Judges, there is this pattern that continues over and over and over again. And you see it in the people, but you also see it in the judges. They turn to other gods and get themselves in a pickle. Mm-hmm. And they cry out to God for help. And God sends someone to deliver them, and while that leader's alive, they're kind of recognizing God again. But as soon as that leader dies, they're right back down worshiping other gods and away from God. And every time this spiral continues, it keeps going down. Mm-hmm. So like the first couple of judges are, one or two judges are men of upstanding character, and they're serving God their whole life, and people are following God their whole life. And Gideon's that first one that we see, if I remember correctly, that's not quite like that, who's struggling and who's not always following God all the time. And then by the time you get to Samson, which is the final judge in this book, this is a guy who can't hardly follow God at all.
Yeah.
And it's just getting worse and worse and worse. This pattern is repeating, and it's because the people of Israel are doing the same thing.
Yeah.
They're getting further and further away from God, and when God does show them love and does show them grace and sends someone to deliver them, they're right back to their old ways again.
Yeah.
And so not only are the deliverers failing to deliver them with any kind of permanence, but the people are failing to come back to the God who keeps over and over and over again extending His grace to them. And if we could just get a good deliverer, one that will actually live his life in a holy way and bring the people to really come to know God, then everything will be better. And that's not the way that it works.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just constantly see this thing. And the question that should be coming to our mind is, what is it going to take to get these people to turn toward God for good?
Yeah.
What is it going to take for someone to be the person God sends that actually follows through with it all the way?
Yeah.
And lo and behold, we get to the New Testament, and here's Jesus that's perfectly fulfilling that role.
Yeah.
And so he's creating anticipation.
Yeah.
And so when you're reading through this, you're looking for, man, what we need a better deliverer than this.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we should be looking for.
Yeah. No, you're right. That's a good point too. That's real good. You know, and there is this all the way through Judges. There's this pattern that repeats itself over and over again. And the humbling part of this is that, okay, we take this and think about the application for ourselves. How many times have there been at least seasons in our lives where we went from crisis to crisis? Oh, God, help me with this. Oh, God, help me with this. And then God helps. Oh, God, help me. If you just get me out of this, here's what I'll do for you. I'll serve you more. I'll give more. I'll go to church more. I'll love my family more. Whatever. And then the needs met and crisis is averted. But then we kind of lull back into, same thing again. And Judges is a kind of a book where God's, I think, based on His justice and his godly discipline, I think He's given the people the kind of leadership they deserve, not necessarily what they would want most. So, in other words, He's given them flawed leaders. It's kind of like when we get a bad president, and it's like, yeah, but we're living kind of wicked in our country, so we kind of deserve that, kind of thing.
Well, and there's a I forget exactly where it is, but there's one prophet who speaking from God, he says, like the people, so the priest.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually, you just kind of come to realize the best you're going to do is the kind of people you got without God dramatically doing something different. Like the best that we're capable of is, well, that's it,
Yeah.
So we're not going to have, whether we're electing people to Congress or whether we're choosing a pastor for a church or whether we're a CEO of a company or whatever, whatever kind of group of people you've got, the best you can do is the people you've got. You know what I mean? You're not going to be any better just because you have a title or just because you're in a certain position of esteem or whatever. It takes the work of the Holy Spirit changing you for you to be better than that.
Yeah.
And that's so I agree completely that they're getting the kind of leader that they are.
Yeah.
And therefore deserve.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So, well, that's pretty interesting. It says in verse 33, it says, as soon as Gideon died, the Israelites prostituted themselves. Interesting way to describe that. By worshiping the images of Baal, making Baal their god. They forgot the Lord their God, who had rescued them from all their enemies surrounding them. Nor did they show any loyalty to the family of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, And despite all the good he had done and for Israel, so they forgot God, they forgot Gideon, and that's kind of the pattern that God's people were in right now, right? So,
I guess he served his purpose for the length of time he was put there. And
just like all the
That's why he
judges.
stepped back and said, hey, I don't want to be your leader, Lord, needs to be your leader.
Yeah,
You just give me monetary value for what I
Yeah.
accomplished, you know?
yeah, that's right. So, all right. Well, that seems like a depressing place to stop, but a good place to stop. All right. Any other questions or comments before we go? All right. We had such a higher point last week when all those bidding nights were destroyed. But that's what it is to be God's people. So, all right. Let's pray together, and we'll be dismissed. God, you're good. Even where we're not, you're still good. Thank you, Lord, for loving us.